Hi, everyone. I'm here with Rob Henderson, and we're here to talk about White Lotus. Rob, how are you?
I'm good, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. So this show is it's a six episode. It's its first season. I think the show. I didn't realize this until the very end of the show, but it's about the hotel, right? It's not. We're not going to follow the characters from season one onward, right?
Right, yeah, that was my understanding too. So it was recently renewed for a second season,
Uh,
and it's supposed to have like a whole new cast of characters and everything, and we're not following these characters along, which I think is probably for the best. I mean, we
yeah,
can get more into it later, but I thought the show started very strong. Like the character development and the interactions and everything were very intriguing. But by the end, I wasn't entirely enamored with these characters and the idea of continuing to watch them.
have you ever, by the way, have you ever seen a show called Room 104 on HBO?
I know of the show, but I've never watched it.
It's like that. It's like there's like this motel and there's something room 104, and every episode is just like a new character who comes into the motel and they have like some kind of adventure.
Okay.
So it's like that. It's like there's certain shows that are just based around a place, not necessarily the characters. So yeah, because the characters their stories never intersected. I always expected that to happen, and they had a little bit of interaction, but the stories were basically separate.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't figure that out until like the last episode or second to last. That it was about the hotel, not the people. So it's in Hawaii, and so there's six episodes, and I think let's just get right into it because you really liked it, and I'm a little more mixed in my views. So tell me what you liked about the show.
Well, I'll say that I started off really liking it, and then by the end, I didn't think they stuck the landing. And the finale, I was pretty disappointed by it. So I guess like overall, like that definitely affected my overall opinion of the show. But I'll say that it was like a pretty good show. Um, Yeah, I mean, so what are the things that I liked about it? Well, I mean, like very early on, of course, like I'm always interested in sort of like class and status dynamics, and we could see that very clearly with the guests of the hotel. The Mossbacher family and Shane and his wife and Tanya, right, the sort of eccentric older lady, and so they're very clearly like members of the 1%, very well to do, like
Yeah.
to be able to stay at a White Lotus. I mean, it must cost thousands of dollars a night. And then
Mhm.
there's the staff of the hotel, who are sort of like working class people who are just trying to get by, struggling, whatever. I mean, I think it was in the first or second episode, Armand, the hotel manager, he didn't know that his new employee Lonnie was pregnant, right? I think she's
Mhm.
a Hispanic or Hawaiian woman, Lonnie.
I thought she was
She was like
Asian.
a oh, she
She could have
I
been.
don't
I thought
know.
so. Yeah.
But she was like a hotel housekeeper or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, she was pregnant and she didn't want to say anything because she needed the money and the job. And Armand was like shocked when she starts to give birth in his office.
Mhm.
And yeah, I found like those kind of like little dynamics interesting too. Like even within the classes, Armand himself is like,
Yeah.
sort of a worker at the hotel, but he also has to manage these people. So he's like, even he is sort of above them, and he didn't even
Yeah.
know what this woman's name was, and
Yeah.
kept getting it wrong throughout that first episode.
Yeah. So he is he's like the manager of the hotel. And I've worked like these kind of jobs, not at a hotel, but like at a restaurant, like hospitality jobs. And you are not hospitality. Restaurants aren't hospitality, are they? No. So
Right.
like I've worked at like restaurants and stuff like that. And the yeah, I mean there is like a it's sort of like the Mossbachers and the guests. I don't think they're in the same universe as them. They're thinking like Armand is like my boss and he's a prick or I like him or whatever. So yeah, and the other ones and all the guests. So there's three groups of guests that we follow around. Like yeah, just the lonely woman, the couple, and then the Moss. I think we could treat them separately. So I'll tell you, yeah, I thought some of the class stuff was good. I thought some of it was overdone and not very realistic. So like the Shane character, I did not think was a realistic character. I think somebody said, "Give me a caricature of like a doofus frat boy," and he went to Cornell. He's wearing Cornell hat, so he's like not It's funny they picked Cornell because they're signaling like he's well off. He's not like a genius. He can't get into like Harvard or something.
I,
I think
I
there's
thought
like
of Andy Bernard from The Office, right? Like I'm sure a lot of viewers made that connection of like the sort of doofus who is like proud of his school, but like the writers put that character through that school on purpose to like indicate that yeah he's not as good to get into like one of these other fancy schools.
Yeah, so he's there, and then his, he's got this what new wife. So yeah, so he's just like a character. So, like everything that comes in out of his mouth is
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like calibrated. So he's got this wife who's doing clickbait content on like some like websites,
BuzzFeed or
and
something.
yeah, and she's really pretty and really feminine and really attractive, and like you don't like see like what about him she would find attractive, right? Like yeah, probably just his money. I mean, I think that's the point. But it's not
Yeah.
even like there doesn't seem to be like a realistic like way that these two people could have connected in my mind, and
Well,
I don't think they showed it. I don't think they showed it well. I think they just showed him as like a caricature, and there was just like nothing like interesting or funny or noble or like honest, like something you'd expect something there, but it was just too much trying to prove he was like this this dumb frat boy.
in the opening scene of the very first episode, the two girls, Olivia and Paula, the two college student girls of the Mossbacher group,
Yeah,
um, they're making this sort of commentary, and at first I thought they were sort of describing these characters like they already know what's going on, and they're just sort of like telling us, the audience, who they were. And they were talking about Shane, saying like,
yeah,
oh, Dartmouth, international finance, he has a small dick, like sort of
yeah,
like telling us all these traits about them. And then it's not until later that we learn like, oh, they were just sort of guessing and like sort of like skewering these people privately as a little joke between those two. So I found it funny also that like they guessed that he was a Dartmouth grad, but he actually went to Cornell, and that he has
yeah.
a small dick, and like all this stuff. And in a way, like they were kind of spot on, because, well, I don't know if exactly, but not totally off base, because his wife Rachel like clearly doesn't like to have sex with this guy. And they were on base about him working in finance and the kind of school that he went to. And I think like at some point early in their interaction, uh
I think
Rachel
she like
says
type of sex.
something.
It depends on like the emotional moment. I don't think it was like a physical thing. Like when he was like really sweet to her,
Yeah.
like she would, but
Oh
like
yeah, she
when
would
they're
kind of go
fighting,
along with it. Yeah, I mean, so as far as like when they met, I think so Rachel, the wife, she said something like, they'd only known each other for like 4 or 5 months, and like she was in a weird place or something, probably with her career or whatever. And yeah, the Shane character did come off very much as like a caricature. I mean, I found it funny. So there were a lot of books in this show, right? Like you see
yeah,
characters reading books, and Shane the whole time is only
yeah,
reading one book, and the only
yeah.
book he's seen reading is Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. Which, like, when did that book come out? Like 15, 20 years ago? Like,
Yeah, it's an old
was
book.
that?
That's right.
It's
It's
kind of an
yeah,
older book, and I
but
think a
but
lot of this stuff is outdated, and he never
yes, but
finishes
they
it.
are. But the girls. So the girls. I mean, he teases. They're reading Freud and Nietzsche, and the one is reading Freud. One is reading. They were reading some other fancy stuff too. I
Jacques
forgot.
Lacan and the like colonialists,
Yeah,
yeah,
excellent.
basically a lot of the deconstruction kind
But
of stuff.
Shane got them because when he was teasing the girls by the pool, he's like, your pace of reading must be, amazing because like they switched their books, like they were in the middle of like one book one day and then the next. So they were, I mean, that they I think they were posers. I don't think they were reading that fast, right? And he was, I think, reading like he's on vacation. I think like a normal human, but maybe read. I don't think you're going to go
Oh,
through book
interesting. So you're
books.
taking this perspective that he was actually like, whereas the girls were kind of like, yeah, like faking their reading, he was actually like
Yeah.
diligently like doing it page by page. And
Well, I
yeah,
mean, I don't know. Like, do you think it's not? I mean, do you think you should read like five books, five complete books, and
what are these like?
like,
I wonder why they
yeah,
chose Blink though. Like of all the books, so so I
yeah,
agree with that. Shane is this kind of a caricature of this frat boy Cornell finance guy who got this like trophy wife. And we could talk about his relationship with his mom too. But
yeah.
why
That was
the
also
book
unrealistic.
Blink?
I thought that was yeah the most unrealistic part. But okay, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, so this Gladwell. I mean, is Gladwell now seen as like the sort of like author for like sort of shallow rich douchebags, or
hmm.
like how is he seen now as an author by people who would make HBO shows, like the sort of
Yeah,
chattering
that's a
class,
good.
the intelligentsia or whatever? Like is he no longer as, has he fallen off his perch, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I wonder. I mean, what they're doing with this, like, yeah.
Mm,
I mean, because I like the way I took it was just like Gladwell is like something you'd pick up on the airport on the way. Maybe it means too old at this point, but something you'd pick up on the airport on on the way to a
yeah,
vacation.
I feel
And
like
this
he
other
used to
stuff
be
is
like a very like esteemed author.
yeah.
I mean, I know he's had his
I don't think
critics.
he has a bad reputation. I think it's just like it's
Yeah.
more. Yeah, I mean, is it like, are these books reflecting their intellectual like capabilities and level, or are they reflecting like their stat? Like in my view, Freud is not, insightful,
Yeah,
right? But I see this sort of high status, uh,
yeah. And
where,
Nietzsche too, right? Whereas I
yeah,
think like in like comparison, like within the books on the show, Blink is probably the easiest to read, maybe like the one that you might like more quickly make fun of. Although to people, you can easily make fun of Freud too, but
mm,
yeah, like Gladwell is like, yeah, is he sort of, well, a few years ago, Steven Pinker uh uh called Malcolm Gladwell a minor genius and like critiqued him basically. Like minor genius was almost like this sort of insult
yeah.
in this article that he wrote about some of Gladwell's work. So I I wonder if that's sort of like the perception that of Gladwell now, that like he's sort of like this clever guy but his books aren't really that great or
I
something.
guess we should. I mean, I
um
guess we should just get to the politics of it directly because, like, you saw. Do you see Andrew Sullivan's review?
yeah, yeah, when you sent it
So
to me, I think you
Pinker
sent it to
reminds.
me,
I mean,
or
Pinker and Andrew
yeah.
Sullivan, I think, are liked by sort of the same kind of people.
Okay.
And I don't know if the I don't know if the I don't know if the producer likes Sullivan, but Sullivan at least likes what they did with the show.
Yeah, he really liked
Um,
that show, right?
yeah, he really loved it. He really loved it, and I think like he's mostly accurate. That it like the if you're going to describe the worldview of it, I think you're going to describe it as like New Yorker classical liberal, like sort of fed up with identity politics, but like also sort of thinks they have a little bit of a point, not like the chair. So I think the chair was like, which is the last thing we talked about, which was like they're more right than wrong, like the leftist crazies. This one, I think they're more wrong than right is the perspective, although they still have something to say. Like, okay, so the non-woke part, I think, of the show was uh, when they were sitting by the pool, and like they own the most. So most of the time, it's like they have like responses to each other. So like the two daughter, the daughter and her friend are like college age, whatever, freshmen or something, and they're always talking like this, saying these woke things. And then the mom is like a Hillary Clinton fan,
Yeah.
and like the dad is just like, I guess, apolitical, and sometimes he goes off on rants like, when did I become the bad guy? I was like I was a
Yeah,
liberal.
I think he's
So
supposed to be this caricature too in some ways, right? Of like this
yeah,
sort of like middle-aged white guy who's like upset.
yeah. And well, yeah, I mean, but he's not driven by like politics. He's just like sort of bewildered by it.
I think
And
he felt like his masculinity was wounded and he just wanted to sort of like be, be validated as a man, which is sort of what
right,
happens at
and the
the
fact
end.
that he gets that through violence is what gives the show a sort of right wing. Like his wife won't have sex with him until he beats the
Okay.
until he gets beat up, or he beats up or yeah, he
Yeah.
fights the
Well, he got his
clown.
ass kicked, but like, he took the risk and tackled the
Yeah,
guy.
at least
So
he
yeah.
fought. And so
Yeah,
then his
yeah.
wife has sex with him finally.
Yeah, that's a good
And
point. Yeah.
yeah, and so, but anyways, so like the mom is fighting with the girls, I think mainly is what the argument is. And
Yeah.
like she's like, oh, Hillary Clinton's a great woman. It was funny when they said like she's a neoliberal and a neoconservative, which is like both true, but it was just like something you'd say. I think that's like, it's actually like sophisticated, but it's also like a dumb thing to say. So I thought that line was really funny. Um, and the but the like the one point was like, oh, I'm sorry, it's so lame to have a job that pays for all this, right? The mother says. But then when she's saying like, be nice to your brother, it's hard for white men or something. And then Paula, who's apparently black or part black, I mean, she's obviously a person of color, quote unquote. They never tell us what, right? I think she's, I would guess, half black, I don't know.
Yeah.
um and and then Paula is like, "Oh, tell me about it." Like the difficulties of white men, and like Olivia's like, "Oh yeah, isn't that because they've always, had the opportunity?" Like she's like, the mom is like, "We can't hire them, white men and all." She's like, "Isn't that because they're the only people who've been hired?" And that's sort of let the hang. So that's like an own from the other
Yeah.
side.
I found
Uh,
that like that whole like the dynamic within that family of like Nicole and Mark is the husband, like the parents who are sort of like center left. I mean, the husband is less political than the mom, or like less, whatever. The mom is like a Hillary Clinton fan or whatever, but they're sort of like the center left, like centrist liberals, like classical liberals or whatever. And then Paula and Olivia, the college student girls, are like, they're more in the woke direction of things. And even the boy to some extent is, right, like he's like less overtly political, but he wears a shirt that says "End homelessness," and he sort of like makes these comments about sort of climate change and stuff. And so the kids are like, more left than the parents, and like
The boy talked about climate change. I missed that. What did he
he
say?
said something about like, oh, we're poisoning the planet, and something about the animals, something along those lines. It was a throwaway comment,
Yeah.
but yeah, so there's this sort of like political dispute within this family, which I find interesting, which I actually, I'd imagine
Well,
this
it's funny.
happens a
Yeah,
lot.
the divide is political apolitical because the boys are apolitical and the girls are fighting. It's like one
Ah,
generation versus another, which is sort of funny.
yeah, and well, the dad, I think he just wants to like get along too. I mean,
Uh,
he, when he's talking about, the Hawaiian dancers, he's like, oh, I think they like to just show their culture, and he's just like yeah, he's totally like removed from the, the conversation or whatever, like the discourse around like colonialization and oppression and all these things. And he almost has this sort of like pseudo evolutionary psychology perspective of like, we're monkeys and all we
yeah,
want is dominance and status and power, and people don't willingly give that up. We're all just monkeys. And that is like, oh, I guess like in a way you could argue that that's sort of like a more right wing perspective, but I think the dad is
yeah,
just like, he's just not interested in politics in general.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, well, I mean the music and the where you cut to the different scenes. It's always got this. The monkeys are always there. I think that's a theme. Like I don't know why monkeys. Like I
There's
don't know
this
if
like
Hawaii.
jungle sort of music. I actually liked the soundtrack a lot to this
Yeah,
show.
I think that's important. Yeah, because
Mm,
that is showing. Yeah, its worldview is sort of yeah, it accepts this evolutionary psychology perspective. There's no pushback on that stuff. There's just like
mm,
there's racism, but like the idea that like people fighting and like is natural. Like the part about having sex with his wife after he punches her. Like the fact that uh like everyone sort of knows that Rachel's like beauty. I love the scene where
oh
the girls are like condescending to Rachel, who's like naive and nice, and they're like, not and like not as pretty uh, and mean. And like she gets up and she's got this great body,
oh
and they're
yeah, that
like,
whole
it just
interaction was
it
fascinating.
destroys them. It destroys them,
Yeah.
right? And this
Well,
is
so
what's
so they're
motivating. Yeah,
they're by the pool, right? So the scene you're talking about, it's Olivia and Paula, the two college girls, are by the pool, and they're reading, Lacan or whatever book they're pretending to read,
yeah,
and Rachel is nearby, and I think like Rachel's trying to be friendly too, and there's also this sort of class dynamic going on with Rachel and
yeah.
Shane and the other guests
She
too.
went to SUNY
Yeah.
Potsdam. Is that a real Potsdam? I only thought there was a.
I don't know. Well, like the
I thought
SUNYs
the
in general
Potsdam
are just sort of
conference.
like,
Yeah,
I guess they're not like
but
the
is it even
fanciest
real? Let me
universities. SUNY
SUNY.
Potsdam.
Yeah, I thought Potsdam.
Yeah.
I know the Potsdam conference in Germany, but
The Potsdam.
no,
That's the
no,
one.
there is. It's
Maybe
apparently
that's
it's real. But it's
okay.
so. Let's see
Yeah.
what the SAT score. We've got to
Oh
figure this out.
man, we're trying to triangulate on Rachel. Maybe that's why Rachel's journalism career didn't take off, because she went to school with SAT score.
1140. What is 1140 as far as percentile?
That's a little more than average, but it's not
Yeah,
it's
a
not
little more than
stellar.
average for a college. Yeah, it's pretty bottom tier.
Yeah,
According to my quick googling,
but at least she was able
1140
to get a journalism job,
is
so
about
that also
60, yeah, 67%. So it's not not a good
Sixty-seven
score.
percentile. So
Yeah,
yeah, but yeah, so she's like, the girls are asking, like, well, I think Rachel is the one who's trying to be friendly and connects with them and sort of says like, where are you guys
yeah.
from, and blah blah blah, and then like
I think the
well, it was
implication
mostly
is they're higher
Olivia.
than Shane. That they've got to be higher than Shane. They've got to be somewhere higher than Cornell. I think we don't know where they
Oh
go.
yeah, but we never learned. That was
Or they
interesting
could
too.
go to like Oberlin, or like do people from Oberlin or like places like that look down on Cornell? Maybe. Like
Probably. I think
yeah,
they. Well, I don't know if they would be Oberlin types. Like, I mean, of course they could go to Oberlin, but I don't know if the writers would say that they went there. They do seem more like, I don't know,
because
like more like a small liberal arts college or something like
is it that
that,
they're
like
too
Middlebury.
conventionally interested in being conventionally attractive for something like Oberlin?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, too conventionally attractive for Oberlin, or like, I don't know, one of these other like Wellesley or something like that. Like they
Yeah,
seem more like like a Middlebury or Amherst or something like, or possibly like Princeton, but I think more like an elite small liberal arts college,
yeah,
given how much they're reading. Um,
yeah.
so then like and they're going back and forth, and like clearly like I couldn't tell for like the first 4 or 5 episodes, I was convinced that Olivia was definitely like a psychopath, and Paula was probably a psychopath, and that interaction sort of like confirmed it for me, because these two were clearly getting a kick out of like cutting Rachel down by like sort of like laughing at where she went to college, and sort of like, why isn't your husband paying for your college student loan bills? Like, can't he
Mhm.
afford it? That kind of
Yeah.
thing. And then yeah, she gets up and like takes off her robe and shows like her perfect bikini body, and these girls are like, oh shit, like, and Rachel's clearly enjoying sort of eliciting this envy from them.
Is she? Is she?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
she's
I
enjoying
think
that?
she is. I think she is. Yeah,
Or is
I
she
mean,
too innocent for that? I don't know. She seems very like seems very naive. I mean,
no, I don't think so. I don't think she's naive, because he also had that other interaction with Mark by the bar, and yeah, I think like
what
she
happened?
sort of like understood that he was, because later on, after that interaction with Mark at the bar, she tells her husband that like, oh yeah, that guy Mark, like the dad in that family, was like staring at my tits, and
No,
like,
of course he
yeah,
was. Of course she knows that. No, of course
yeah.
she knows guys look
Not
at her.
like, oh,
But
but you're thinking she doesn't know like the subtle status games of like trying to make people
yeah,
jealous with the body, and
yeah, I think so. I think yeah, I think that like she knows. I don't like women. I find like have a sometimes distorted ideas of like where they rank, how they look compared to other women, and they're very insecure about it. So she doesn't strike me like as the type who just knows she's prettier than and more desirable than these other girls,
I don't
and like
know.
she can just overcome her Potsdam degree by just showing them her body. I don't maybe.
I don't know. She was thinking like, oh, this is going to make up for it, but she's like, you know what? Fuck these two girls. Like, I'm just gonna go over and like, but of course, it could have also just been the way that they shot it, like the way that they filmed it was like,
Yeah,
to
you're,
make the
you're
viewer
you're
like,
watching from from their perspective. Yeah,
from the girl's perspective, rather.
yeah.
So you're not sure that. So we're not sure that Rachel did it on purpose, but at least the effect of what she did was to make these girls envious. But that wasn't Rachel's intent necessarily, which is,
Yeah.
it's
Well, it's
possible.
funny because the girls, Olivia and Paula, they seem to they actually do get along with Shane. You see he's flirting with them and she gets jealous, right?
Yeah,
So you have these people who are like you think like they're on different sides of like say like politics or wokeness or whatever. Like they would look down this, but like when they're interacting, there's something very primal there, and like they're both sort of high
very
status,
interesting.
and they do get along and they connect at a level in a way that like Rachel, you know, is like these other characters. I guess Rachel is a funny one because she's high status, but she's high status in
By
just because of
marriage.
looks. But yeah,
Well,
look
and her
exactly
looks,
looks
yeah.
which lead to marriage. Yeah, looks which lead to
Well,
marriage. And then
I'm
but these
also
other two
wondering
are sort of
how.
these other two, Shane and the girls, are genuinely good at climbing status hierarchies. I mean that I
Right,
think is key, and that's why he's a finance bro, and they're super woke. But it's sort of the same thing is going on.
right. Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Well, Shane himself. So yeah, Shane never makes, or Rachel. We never learn about their politics, right? Which is kind of interesting. Um, you
He
know,
mocks Shane mocks the clickbait stuff. He mocks journalism sort of
oh,
at one
right. So he
point.
kind of like, yeah, he's whatever, he sees through it, or he like made a joke about it being just from like whatever bullshit issue of the day, something like that.
Yeah,
But
and
they also
Rachel.
put that in Shane's mouth, and I guess like, yeah, this is supposed to be like contributing to this caricature of someone who's just like some like dopey rich white boy who doesn't care about the issues or something, right? Like
Well,
sort of this
I don't think
caricature
that
idea.
that part of him is supposed to be that bad because like everyone knows like what Rachel was doing was clickbait nonsense. I mean, I think that's like everyone acknowledges that. And she does try to do something like women in business or something, and then like the mom gets
Oh
mad at
yeah,
her because she wasn't woke enough. Like for the Hillary Clinton type, it was not about being woke enough. It's just about like not giving her proper respect, right?
right. Because they
Like
say that
acknowledge,
she rode the Me Too movement to her current
which is
position. Yeah,
which,
which is
yeah,
like,
it's
yeah, that was pretty interesting. No. That's, yeah. I
yes.
mean, I wonder if so you mentioned before that the girls and Shane were getting along and they were flirting. And so my question is, do you think that was like sincere flirting, or was that like the girls knowing that Rachel was watching them and watching them interact with the fiance, and they were like sort of like giggling and flirting to like piss Rachel off after after seeing
I
her
think it
earlier in
was
the pool?
yeah. I think it was. I mean, I think it was natural. I mean, I do because the way it starts is they're reading the books, and he's making fun of them, and they're a little bit rude. I guess it is. I mean, it is consistent with that. You're right. You're right. I guess it is consistent. Yeah, I didn't think of that. I didn't actually didn't think of that possibility. You have to think
Yeah.
like, what kind of guy would these girls be attracted to? It's not. It's not. It could be someone like Shady. It's not necessarily going to be. You know, it's the other guy. It's like the Hawaiian guy because he's like conventionally masculine. He's got a nice body and he's lower class
Oh, right.
or whatever. He's
Kai.
not mouthing woke platitudes, although he's got some kind of oppression story. But that's not like something he's fundamental to his character. So yeah, I do think he's the kind of guy they would be attracted to. And
Yeah,
I
that's
so I
probably
do
fair.
and I yeah, but they would make fun of him at a distance before definitely before they
Yeah.
knew him.
Well, they
Which
were
is
making fun of him at a
yeah,
distance.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah,
also now I'm wondering if there's this sort of pre-selection effect where, once they saw how hot Rachel really was,
yeah, that's a good
that
point
makes
too.
him more attractive to them, right? Like if this guy could land that hot girl, now he's more attractive to us as a consequence of his sort of being pre-selected by such an attractive woman.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I'm not, yeah, different layers here, I suppose. Um,
yeah,
I found that the Rachel character, so she, I think there was like a naivete to her, and part of it was her class background. Like Shane at one point says like, "Oh, your mom could never afford to fly to
yeah.
Hawaii," and of course she herself is like some clickbait journalist, so she doesn't make much money. The kind of college she went to, and so on. She's sort of like whatever middle class or something, and that was I think like a point of an interesting point of tension between her and Shane was when they first arrived. Shane wanted the pineapple suite, like the honeymoon suite, and they ended up getting like I don't know some other like really fancy room, but it wasn't the pineapple suite.
Mm,
And one class difference I saw here was that for Rachel it was fine because that's like by far the nicest hotel she'd ever been to anyway, and she wouldn't know the difference between this suite or that suite. So for her it was fine, but for Shane it was very important that they get this other suite. Um, and it wasn't. I don't think for him it was about like how nice the room was. It was just like you pay for this room. I'm rich. Like I should get this room
yeah,
that we paid for.
yeah,
And he was being very stubborn about it. He couldn't let it go. And so I think like, and that's kind of how it started between them, right? Like how this like
yeah.
slow like boiling argument that erupted later on started was basically this class difference between Shane thinking like I want the room that we paid for, and Rachel saying like this is a nice room anyway, let's just stay with it.
Yeah. Well, I thought. I mean, I thought that was sort of that. That was a bit. I thought that. I mean, I thought that was overdone. Like, the fact that he like his whole honeymoon just becomes about like rich people also like have a time is valuable to them, right? I mean, they're not. I don't think like rich people who went to Cronulla are always like complaining to the manager and like being obsessive over that over stuff like that. I don't I don't think it is, and it could have got like a refund or whatever. He really he was really just it became personal. It seems like it became personal with Arnand, who he didn't like.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is realistic. Like the guy, his mom shows up, and like who's that clueless? Like, oh, he brings his mom on his honeymoon, and then they hang out with the couple, and like he doesn't know that like Rachel's not going to like that. I mean, that's just very that's just very unrealistic. Like they're
Well,
that
maybe he
clueless
thought
about
that
what
she
they.
wouldn't like it, but it doesn't like I don't know. Shane struck me as if we're taking the character as he was probably like, you know what, this girl's just lucky to be with me because I'm so rich, and so I can bring my mom out, I can complain, I can do whatever I want, and it doesn't matter because like she's just lucky to be with me. And I think like, and there were indicators of this later that like that's all that the mom was looking for her son, for Shane, and Shane, that's all he was looking for was like a very beautiful woman who would just like passively go along, like yeah, the trophy wife idea.
Yeah.
um
Well,
and
I mean, are there people? Do people like this still exist? I mean, I don't. You've had. I think you went to Yale, so you would know better than me
that whole
probably.
Yale
Do
thing.
people like this still
I
exist? Like
mean, I
guys who just want a trophy wife and who want to go into finance? They must, right?
there are some of those guys, and there are even guys like finance guys I know who have like very weird relationships with their mothers,
Uh-huh.
who like literally. I mean, I don't know what like the normal amount of time is to communicate with your family. Like, I call my mom every couple weeks, but like these guys are like literally texting their moms every couple hours.
Uh-huh.
Um, and that like the fact that a grown man has that kind of relationship with the mom blew up. So like Shane wasn't totally out. Like he was clearly like exaggerated for effect, but
Yeah.
that kind of personality type I think does kind of exist.
Okay.
But of course like
Maybe.
they
Yeah.
they they sort of created that character for the show. um
The value,
Yeah,
but the value system, yeah, but that value system. I mean, is that something that is that something that's still? I mean, so you have these people. They're not religious, but they're elites. But they believe in like the man, going out there making a lot of money and having a pretty wife, and the wife being happy with that and just doing nonprofits. I mean, how
I
common is
think
this among
so.
people who say go to Yale or Harvard today?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think like so my impression is that it's sort of they're like even within these elite institutions there's like tiers of like the upper middle class who are like the sort of woke champions, like that's sort of the people from like the 90th to the 99th percentile of like the income distribution, who are like sort of like the woke champions and who like are supporting social justice and equal rights and all that for women. And then like among the 1%, like the richest of the rich, there are still like more, I don't want to say like like traditional values, but closer to something like traditional values, where it's still kind of like okay for like a guy to go to work and earn a lot of money, and then for the woman to run charities or do like other kinds of like work for different kinds
Yeah.
of groups
Are all those
to
people
whatever it happens to be.
are they all Republicans? People like that?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, probably a little bit more evenly divided, but not that much more. So, like, I would still say, like, at least the majority of the students at I go to places like Harvard and Yale, they're probably more Democrat than not. But it's probably more politically diverse within that 1% than that 9% I was referring to, like that sort of upper middle class
Yeah.
bracket, which is like very skewed towards the Democrats. So yeah, I mean, like, yeah. So that's an interesting question, right? Like, is Shane and his mom, are they Republican? Like, they're not, they're not like crazy like MAGA Trump supporting types, but are they sort of like
Oh,
Mitt
well,
Romney
like, he
Republicans?
could love Trump. I think I think he's almost ideally suited for Trump actually. For as much as you can be for an Ivy League, right?
You're a
There's no
Cornell
like
grad.
yeah, there's no like I don't think he's like a I mean, I don't think he's like Romney. I don't think he's like Cheney and wants to like democratize the Middle East or anything like that. I think he's just like, ha ha, these people, these stupid journalists, these stupid libs, let's laugh at them, sort of mean spirited, just sort of likes trolling. I mean, I think that, I think
That's
Trump could be sort of,
possible.
ideal for him.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Not too
possible. I
serious about,
suppose.
policy or ideas or anything like that.
Yeah,
I think a type of person like that ends up liking Trump. He's not going to go volunteer for the campaign. He's not going to go do anything.
yeah,
Uh,
but he likes the tax cuts, and maybe he
Yeah, he
likes
likes the
the
tax
the,
cuts.
the
He likes Trump's.
jokes,
He likes the jokes, the trolling.
the humor. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's possible. Um, yeah. So yeah, that was like the Shane the character. Like I don't know, he was definitely like to me he was far like he might have been the least interesting among the characters.
Yeah,
Oh
one
yeah, so
dimensional.
and yeah, very one dimensional. And then Rachel was I think a little bit more interesting simply because like she in some ways, like in addition to like the hotel staff and everything, like maybe like a sort of an audience surrogate of like here's someone who's clearly not from this world, who's like just as amazed at this kind of hotel as the viewer would be. Although I don't know, the show's on HBO, so maybe a lot of the HBO viewers are traveling to places like that, but I doubt it. um, so yeah, and then to me actually the most interesting character was maybe Armand, the hotel
Well, let's talk.
manager.
Let's talk about Rachel for a second. Do you think that
Yeah.
like a lot of shows have this like thing where like okay, you expect it to be sort of like she should come to realize, or like there's supposed to be like an arc where she realizes she wants something more from life. But I think what the viewer sees, or what I see, is that she's remarkably beautiful and remarkably average in every other way. And like the one thing she has is her beauty. And like
Yeah.
the thing is like why not just embrace it, right? And like why is she like so desperate for a career? Now that's my
Oh
perspective.
yeah,
That
yeah,
might
yeah.
not be the producer's perspective. It could be, but it
Hmm.
seems to me like she wants something else where she's not really that well suited for something. She's not like she's passionate. She's not like she doesn't show some passion. She just has this idea she should have a career. She should be doing something. There's not something she loves that like Shade is preventing her from doing. Um,
Hmm.
and so
Well, no, no. For a
is there a
while
reaction?
though, she was trying to like write that piece, right? Like she got assigned to write some piece about something or other, and then Shane
But
got
was
mad
it
at her.
important?
It's
Was
like,
it important? Was it something? It was. She was just like taking any job. Like she
yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
like,
it wasn't an important thing, but she and Shane. Okay, so this was actually kind of interesting because Shane was saying like, "Why would you take that on our honeymoon? This is a special time." And she was saying that like, "I worked really hard to build these connections and these relationships within journalism, and if I decline this, then I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to get assignments anymore." Like she wants to like sort of stay on the radar and sort of like be like known as a person who can whatever write pieces for whatever clickbait outlets. And for whatever reason that was important to her. Maybe it was like some element of the sunk cost fallacy where like she spent, you know, she went to college and she whatever like developed all these connections in journalism and wrote all these pieces, so she it became like a part of her identity, and it's very hard for her to just let that go. um and on the other hand, she wasn't actually happy with Shane either, right? Like she's, I don't know how young she's supposed to be in the show, but like she seemed like sort of like an, you know, an emerging adult who's sort of like trying to find herself, and she's clearly unhappy with Shane, and married him maybe just because he's rich and like decent looking guy, and she was like feeling lost in her career. So like maybe she's just doesn't know, like I'm not happy with Shane, maybe it's my career that can, you know, sort of fulfill me, but
yeah,
clearly like that's not really doing it either.
yeah.
So
There's no indication that that'll ever, that'll ever do it.
yeah,
And
well,
so
in the end, she did end up choosing Shane, right? Like that
yeah,
to me was
right.
interesting. Was that like they had this big fight? She essentially breaks up with him, sleeps in a different room,
Yeah.
and then
And, th-
like,
and then she's like, "I'll be happy." No, she goes, "I'll be happy." So is she submitting to something she shouldn't be submitting to? Is that what we're supposed to see, or is she submitting to the right thing? I mean, the thing that she should be doing, right? That's the question.
yeah, well, okay, so I think a lot of conservatives would say she's doing the right thing, right? She's foregoing the career to get
Yeah,
married and, you know, sort of start this family and whatever, like be a trophy wife or something. And probably a lot of liberals would view that as like selling out, right? Like you're giving
yeah,
up your, you know, sort of esteemed career in journalism to marry this like frat boy douchebag
yeah.
who doesn't really love you. He just loves your image and what you
Right,
represent
or
to
not even
him.
an
And
esteemed career in journalism. It's just like a possibility. Like
yeah,
you go to Potsdam, you don't have these connections. You don't have the you probably don't have the brains. I mean, you just have, it's like she wants something unrealistic. She wants to make it a field where she's like very ill suited to make for reasons of both background and maybe capabilities. Although she's pretty, and that would obviously help her in journalism. It
which
would
like
help
in
her
that
anything.
case, I mean, like if we're just talking about like sort of like taking the resources you have and sort of stretching them as far as you can go to get to the highest place you can, then marrying Shane is the right move, right? Like in all
Yes.
likelihood, even if she was like, that's, I mean, how sort of like cutthroat and sort of like, you know, the power laws that govern an occupation like journalism would be, even if she did go to the best schools in the world and publish in the top tier publications, she still would probably not make it, or like it would, the odds would be against her. um Whereas like, you know, very clearly like the most valuable resource she has, like you said, is her looks. And so like by marrying Shane, she immediately joins like the 0.1%.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the very very affluent, very well to do. I mean, there was even a conversation with Shane, like she was overhearing the conversation, eavesdropping. Shane and his mom were like talking about these other families, these other rich families they know. And Shane was like, "Oh yeah, like the father in this family, they earned their money by because he writes fictional crime thrillers." And she starts to like mockingly laugh and say, "Well, I guess they have to make their money somehow."
Oh,
And it's like, you know, these are like such snobby people that like, okay, they're rich, but they write these sort of like trashy crime thrillers, and that's like a reason to laugh at them.
yeah,
So she's gonna join that world, right? Where like, you know, you're so rich that you laugh at how other people get rich.
yeah. Right. Yeah.
Hmm.
And we don't know how that family got rich, right? We never
Yeah,
find out.
was there a dad? Did Shane ever make a reference to his father?
No, I'm pretty sure they didn't. No.
That was
Yeah,
kind of
that
interesting
remains
too.
that remains in the background. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's funny, you're supposed to think Rachel died throughout the show.
Oh, are we? Is
Spoiler.
that it?
Spoiler alert. Look, there's spoiler. This whole thing is full of spoilers for everyone. But yeah,
Oh, that's a good
you're
point.
supposed
So
to think Rachel died. That's what you
at
thought
the
too, right? Of course.
so for the viewers, like at the very beginning of the show, like the very first opening scene is you
Is
see
yeah.
Shane seeing a body being loaded onto an airplane,
And he's
and then I
alone
guess
and
throughout
yeah.
the whole show you're wondering who's the person in that whatever that casket.
I think you're supposed to think
Um,
it's Rachel because
why
Rachel's
do you
not
think
with him at
it's
the airport.
Oh.
That who else would be? I mean, it's natural that Rachel would be at the airport with them
I
when they're
never made
leaving.
that connection.
How could you
The whole
never
time I
make that
was like, who
connection? I
died?
was waiting for her to die. I was like waiting, but then at some point I figured out no, they're not going to kill her. But I got that we were supposed to think that. I mean, clearly at the beginning.
Interesting. Well, that kind of makes sense, especially towards
Yeah,
the
he's
end
going
where
home
they have
alone.
that fight, right? And Shane
Yeah,
is like angry and he's like stomping and like hitting the table with his fists. So
and
you're
he's
thinking
angry
like,
and he's really really disturbed. So he's disturbed. He's alone at the airport at the end. They're loading up a
hmm,
body. You know, like
hmm.
it makes sense that yeah, it's going to be.
Yeah. When I watched, I had no idea. I was like, oh, who's that? Like, I thought that was like the whole point of the show was like the mystery of which one of these like Lotus guests
That's funny.
dies.
That's funny you missed that. No,
I totally
I'm
missed it.
100% sure you're supposed to think, yeah, it
Yeah.
was Rachel.
Now, in my defense, I was on vacation when I watched most of the show, and I was pretty drunk for most of it. So,
Uh,
so that
you
could be
caught
why.
a lot.
That could be why.
Yeah.
um, but anyway, so I guess like yeah, that was like sort of all of Rachel's arc, and like I wonder what the producers and the writers wanted us to think about her character. It was like, did she make the right choice or not? I think probably we're supposed to believe that she made the wrong choice, like that she sold out, and that like sort of like along the theme that like Paula was saying when Olivia ended up sort of whatever taking her family's side or whatever in that whole the robbery when their safe got robbed and everything, and Paula was like, you know, you're one of them, you know, you're not with us,
Yeah. Well,
you know,
yeah.
you're
So
sort of
there
with
is
the
this
rich, not the
undercurrent of
oppressed.
like white privilege is real, right? That there is like an undercurrent, not I mean, a little bit more than an undercurrent, but they, it's like the white people always have a response. Yeah. No wonder Andrew Sullivan likes it because these kind of people, they like, they, they like, so, there's a type who just likes to like have the conversation. Like they're fine with people yelling at them and saying, patriarchy and white privilege and that. And then, but they also like to be able to get in their digs, right? Their responses, right? To show like, oh, treat people as individuals and that. So it's like the thing was a conversation, and the kind of conversation these intellectual dark people, web kind of people like, which I don't like because I think wokeness is much more pernicious and doesn't really have that much of a pointer and like it's something that I think should be not necessarily negotiated with and come to terms with. But I think that's that's the idea. You're not going to get a radical redistribution of wealth like the poor Hawaiian guy, right? He was a good kid until he ran into that girl from the Ivy League school who told him to basically rob the family, and now he's going to go to jail, right? So he's like, he really screwed up by listening to her. Uh, and so there's that. So yeah, I mean, the Rachel thing, that my own interpretation is she made the right decision, but like what we know from like just the producer, what they're likely to think is that probably not, that probably wasn't in their head. But then like if that's the case, I wonder why. I guess that you needed her to go to Potsdam to make it realistic that she needed Shane, because if she went to Harvard and looked like the way she did, she doesn't just marry for money, right? She has other opportunities to do things.
That's a good
So
point.
so maybe, yeah, so maybe that's like how you get Rachel to be realistic in any way, is to give
Yeah,
her
and she's
a little.
sympathetic regardless too, I think. Like you sort of understand her predicament, and no matter what she did, I think like you would have sympathized with her. Like she's never shown to be like she never says anything that's like offensive or malicious, or like all of the other characters, they say something that makes you kind of like
Yeah,
cringe or
no,
makes you
she's
like you could argue that you hate them, but Rachel was like a like an innocent in the show,
no,
like within
yeah,
the universe of that show.
she's got, yeah, even that is like a low class thing. Like to have a pretty girl who's like that pleasant is not, it is sort of harder to find in higher classes now. Um, and she's, and she, yeah, and she's uh, what was I gonna say? Yeah, she's oh, I lost my train of thought. I was gonna say something else about Rachel.
Well,
Um,
so anyway, like I think like you know regardless, so if she had chosen to like divorce Shane and pursue her career, we would have been like, okay, that you know she made the right choice. And the fact that okay, so she didn't, she stays with Shane. Like at first I was like, this is kind of weird, like unexpected, whatever, but like okay, maybe in the end it's understandable.
Oh yeah, here's what I
uh
was gonna say. Yeah, there was even a thing where like you get the idea that even she is privileged because when she's talking to the black woman, so
oh
the
yeah.
black woman is like her whole, she's like putting up with Kanye's nonsense, and Kanye's the rich, horrendous looking white lady, and the black woman is like supposed to be this, like you ever watch the commercials where there's like a white person acting crazy and there's like a black person rolling their eyes, like it's a very common trope in
I mean, that was
commercials.
kind of what this was, right? Like a
Yeah,
sort of
exactly.
variation of that.
Yeah, it's always the
Yeah.
black, yeah, the black person like rolling there, like, oh, I'm the normal one. Like, oh, look at these crazy white people, and and like even Rachel is like a sort of a crazy white person too, because she's well off. I guess she has this option, and then she just gets
Yeah.
up and oh, I'm done, right? And so she like that's like a
That was a good
she's like
impression.
she's sick of like holding up the world like as a black one, and so there's that
Yeah.
too.
Well, yeah. I mean, that was kind of like the Tanya character and her interactions with Belinda. I mean, that was so like. Well, I actually thought like, especially the first like half of the show, the three quarters of the show, Tanya was like just hilarious to me. Like the way she spoke, the way that she
Uh,
like interacted with the other characters, like yeah, just her whole like character was just interesting and amusing to me. And I thought that like initially she was sincere. So Tanya's like the sort of like wealthy older lady who goes there by herself to spread her dead mother's ashes into the ocean or something. And she runs into Belinda at the spa. That Belinda's the black woman who works for the hotel. And, you know, I think she really wanted to help this woman like start her own spa or start her own business or whatever. But then like this sort of white privilege commentary or the undercurrent throughout the show is that like, you know, this woman, she like, you know, she uses her money to kind of like string people along, but then as soon as she finds something more interesting to do, then she, you know, redirects her attention. And that's when she ran into the sort of older looking gentleman who
yeah,
I mentioned looked a little bit like Scott Adams.
yeah,
Can't remember his name in the show, but like, yeah, the bald sort of older white guy.
yeah. And I said she looks like Trump, which is funny. Uh, yeah, if you haven't watched the show, you'll see it now.
uh,
But yeah, she's yeah, I think that's right. And then at the
Well,
end, she
and so then yeah, so Belinda is sort of like this put upon working class black woman who like, you know, sees a glimmer of hope and like, oh, I can get out of this place and start my own business.
yeah.
And then Tanya last minute rips it away and she goes off
But
with this
Tanya
other
gives
guy
her a
that she
huge
falls in
chunk
love
of
with.
money, right?
Oh yeah,
Tanya gives her like
that
this
was weird, like
envelope.
an envelope. And so at first I was like, no one carries cash like that. But then I remember Tanya's this weirdo eccentric woman, and so she might actually carry
Well, she
around
went to the
stacks of
bank to
cash.
get it, and she went to the bank to get it to give it to her or something. I
It's
mean,
fine. Okay, yeah, yeah. The hotel probably has like you know, yeah, a place where you can make withdrawals like that too.
yeah,
Um, and then yeah, so then Belinda later is like serving as this kind of whatever, like like a almost like a therapist or something for Rachel, who's complaining and crying about her husband. And that's when Belinda gets up and she's like, I'm dealing
yeah,
with these crazy white people,
yeah,
whatever. And like but I think like the show did it in a, you know, they didn't do it in a heavy-handed way, because we sort of see both perspectives, right? Like from Belinda's perspective, this is just like a rich young white woman crying her eyes out about all the privileges she has in the world. But we also see this from Rachel's perspective, who is this sort of like middle class woman who feels like her options are limited, and she married this guy under sort of confused pretenses. She didn't know who he really was, and so you can sort of sympathize from both of their
yeah,
perspectives. So I don't think like the show takes like a hard line like for or against either one, like Belinda
yeah. You know,
or
it's
even
yeah,
Tanya, because I think Tanya was portrayed as fairly sympathetic as well. Like I don't think like yeah, Tanya never really did anything wrong or bad
no,
or
but she's
whatever.
she's
Like
annoying to everyone. Yeah, she's talkative and annoying and self-centered.
yeah,
She's not like I don't think you're supposed to. I don't think you're supposed to like her. I think you're supposed to find her annoying. But
Stifler's mom. She played
who?
Steve Stifler's mom in the American Pie trilogy. For anyone who ever
Okay.
watched American Pie, she was the mom of
Yeah.
Stifler.
Well, I
Anyway,
guess one thing. I guess one thing, though, like an overarching theme of this, and like a lot of art is like this, is like if you're comparing the poor and the rich, like the poor have to be. So the rich are like they're petty. They have these privileges. They don't care about things that are important. If they like talk about social causes, it's very it's very superficial and like a way to get status. While the poor are just like working hard and trying to survive and like real. They have this like genuineness that like the rich have lost with all their concern of like going up against it. And I just think that like could you even like make like are there shows or could you make a show that's opposite where the rich are portrayed sympathetically and actually like hardworking and more moral and more frugal and like getting where they are for a reason, and the poor are just like irresponsible and like terrible.
well, so one of the shows that I once recommended, or one of the movies that I once recommended we watch, is Parasite. Uh, And
Okay.
this was a movie that the critics adored because they sort of like thought that this was whatever, like the comeuppance of the rich. But Alex Tabarrok had a fascinating review of
Yeah,
that
I
movie,
saw that.
which is
Okay.
basically what you're describing, where like the rich Korean family, like the dad at least, is like hardworking. They're all pleasant, polite, well
Okay.
mannered. The
Yeah.
kids too.
Don't spoil it for me. You know what?
Okay,
I'll watch it. I
you
think
should
I'll watch
watch
it.
it. We can, yeah, we can
I,
do a
I
review of
was
it
turned
sometime
off by
too.
the liberal commentary. I was like, this is going to be like the poor are great and the rich are bad.
No, 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 no.
Well, the
That's it.
Joker is another one. The Joker
The
is another one
yeah.
like this, where it's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think it is sort of reactionary. It's like, yeah, you rile these people up at the bottom, and bad things happen. And
Oh,
they have
okay,
their
okay.
own
I see what you're
issues.
saying. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
like society just falls apart, like
but this
when the
isn't really
first one.
like a moral. Okay, yeah, there's no like necessarily like a moral commentary of like the rich being hardworking and everything, and like the poor being like whatever, like scoundrels or something. Like this was like, the Joker was, experiencing mental illness and whatever. And but I think Parasite is like a better example of what you're describing
Okay,
here. But somehow, I think because it's like a foreign movie and whatever, like somehow the critics didn't catch. Like Alex Tabarrok, I think, was onto something with his review.
okay, yeah,
But
I'd like to
anyway,
see this. Okay. But
yeah,
yeah, I thought it was, I thought that was, yeah, like Belinda. I mean, I guess maybe if you're busy all the time,
hmm.
like I think when people are at work, they're more like when they're working real jobs and they're at work. I think it's hard to portray them unsympathetically because like work is work. Like I think it's easy to portray like an academic unsympathetically because like they don't really do
because
anything
because
real.
they're just doing this all day on their laptop.
Yeah, they're doing this. They're whatever. I
Yeah.
mean, they have this idea of
Um.
self importance. While if someone's doing it
Yeah.
like a construction worker or something, or like a
They're
hotel worker,
physically doing
you
something.
see them doing things and you know it's useful. And
Yeah. Well, with
uh
one thing that like so this, you mentioned how the rich, they're sort of disconnected and whatever, but they're also talking a lot about politics. You don't really see any of the working class people, working class meaning like the hotel workers, even Armand, who's sort of like the higher status worker as the
yeah,
manager. None of them talk politics, right? Like very briefly, Tanya thinks that the lover she met at the hotel
yeah, it's
is like
BLM,
a Black Lives Matter guy or something, but he works for like the Bureau of Land Management.
right?
But she tells Belinda like, "Oh, I'm gonna go on a date with a guy who supports BLM or something like that." And Belinda says, "Oh, I think that'd be good for you." But that's like the closest any of them get to like indicating what their politics are, right? Like you don't see Kai, like the handsome Hawaiian guy who later becomes a burglar, or like
Yeah,
Belinda, any of
I
these
think that's
people.
realistic. I think that's
Yeah,
realistic
politics aren't a
because
part of like working class people's lives the way it is for
especially at
the
work,
well-to-do.
yeah, especially at work where like they're worried about getting fired or whatever, or offending people. So especially hospitality, especially a hotel. You don't go around talking about politics there. It's,
Yeah, all of the workers of the hotel too are like members of oppressed or whatever historically mistreated groups.
not the
Armand is
surfer,
gay,
not
Belinda
the
is
whites, not
black.
no the surfer that he
Oh
hits on.
yeah, the well, is he gay though or not? Right, like if he's
I don't
gay,
think
then
until he met Armand, because I don't maybe
that
I
was
don't
his
know,
first gay experience,
maybe
was with
I thought.
Armand when he was like, "I'll give you whatever shift you want," and this like hot surfer dude's like, "All right,"
Sets
starts
him up.
unbuttoning his shirt. Like, I don't think he was. He's probably bisexual, maybe. No.
All right, all right. Yeah, well, they had like white waiters and stuff, but yeah, they weren't. I
Oh
think.
yeah, there was a white guy. Oh wait, what was going on? Okay, so there was, speaking of like whatever good-looking white guys. So there was that scene where Tanya is by the pool,
Oh
um,
yeah, what was
and
that?
the her lover's swimming, and then this like really
Yeah,
good-looking dude lays down next to her. Were we supposed to believe that he was attracted to Tanya?
no, well, definitely no, definitely not. Like,
Or what was like? Why was he like? Why was
is he
he doing
is he
that?
a male escort? Is he trying? Is he know she's a rich woman and she might pay him for like, maybe?
That I was trying to figure that out. Like, are we like what I was wondering is like, are the producers trying to get
No, they're not that
like trying
delusional.
to make Tanya into this like very beautiful woman or something, and like the like you know what I mean? Like they're trying to like push an ideal of beauty onto the viewer by
No, no,
telling
no.
us that
They're
she's
not
so
doing that. I
desirable.
mean, some producers might. That's not this show. No.
No,
Uh,
yeah, I was very confused by it because like we never see that guy again. Like I don't
well,
think we
he's.
ever saw
I
him
think.
before.
Yeah. Well, she
Did we?
doesn't believe. I mean, she doesn't believe. She doesn't believe either. But he's. I think he's like a male gigolo. That's what I
So
thought.
are those like around at the hotel though, like
Uh,
prostitutes or whatever?
maybe. I
I
mean,
mean, there.
maybe he was there with another. lie, right? Because he sees this rich woman. Well, maybe if the hotel is like, where a lot of old rich women go, um,
Okay, yeah, if they catered to
maybe
that.
like, yeah, because yeah, so he's like very over the top. I forget what exactly he does, but he's like sitting, he's over the top at how much he hits on her, right?
Yeah,
What
I
does he
thought
say?
for
Do you remember?
sure that.
Do you remember the
Pardon?
Do you remember the details? Like, what exactly did he say? Because
I don't
I'm forgetting.
remember. He was just like, I don't know, very like overtly flirtatious with her,
Yeah,
and then she's like, "Oh, sorry, that that seat's taken or whatever," and then he gets up. But yeah, he says something like very flirtatious or like suggestive to her, and I was like, "Okay, like is this going to go somewhere?" Like first I thought like, "Why is he hitting on her? This is kind of doesn't make sense because she's like much older than him and he's
no,
like
but
very good looking."
the way he's hitting on her is the way where, like, if you were like an escort or something, you would
Yeah,
get right to the
and so
point.
then I thought like, oh, is he like an escort? And then later on, like, there's going to be a storyline with like, I don't know, sort of someone paying for sex or something, but it never really went anywhere.
Yeah,
Um, I wondered
yeah, we
also
have to
if
rewatch. I mean, I think there's, yeah, I think there's something that we're missing. Yeah, I don't remember that well, but I think, yeah, that would be my
did you see
guess.
so that scene with
What ethnicity was Arnon, by the way?
Armand? I think Armand was just a white guy, but he
He
just
had an
has this sort of
accent.
like, oh,
He had like a
Australian, I think, or maybe New
maybe.
Zealand,
Yeah, looks like. I mean, he looks. I mean, he's pretty dark and, I mean, bushy hair. I mean, I thought he could
tanned.
have been. Yeah. Anyways, okay, yeah, go.
Yeah. Um, so when he falls off the wagon, like I was waiting for something to happen, and uh, and I wondered if he and Mark, the dad of the Mossbacher family, if that was actually going to go somewhere. I was very nervous about this because Mark Mossbacher, the father, learns that his dad didn't die of cancer; he died of AIDS
Yeah,
because of sleeping with a lot of men. And then
yeah,
I think and then he went through this crisis of his own masculinity and his father and everything, and then he runs into Armand at the bar, and I was like, oh man, is this gonna go where I think it's gonna
yeah.
go? Like,
Yeah,
yeah, that was
yeah. So he's, yeah. So it turns, yeah. I mean, the thing about the Armand character is, I think he's a more realistic homosexual than a lot of the homosexuals we see in movies or TV, because he's very lecherous. I mean, he's going around, just like trying to hit on everyone he sees, and, like, trying to take
he's
advantage
not
of the
trying to hit on
place.
everybody. He's only doing that when he's high. He's not like doing that in. I think he's very well put together, but the drugs are like pushing him in
Well, he's
this
always
like,
on edge. Yeah, this is why he's an addict, and, like, he can't, like, handle it, because,
oh,
like,
like white knuckling
he gives into his
sobriety.
passions pretty easily, right? And so he has to be this, like, very strong, highly strung person. And I think a lot of gay men are like that. But I think in TV they're often portrayed as, like, these, like, heroes, or like these people who have nothing wrong with them and are just, like, energetic and nice and fun, and
I
you
mean, I
know
have heard like, I don't know, from like Douglas Murray, who's a the British journalist, that like, yeah, like, think there's like a lot of drug use and stuff and whatever, but which I guess, yeah, like in a way Armand is sort of like representative or something, or like yeah, portray some of that. But I think like, I don't know, I think he was like the most interesting because he had this like duality to him of like, he's like, one of the clearly like a very competent manager, but then like, like happenstance and fortune place this bag in his possession and then it ends up like leading to his demise. um
yeah,
yeah, so like the bag of drugs that Paula, and that was another thing, like this sort of class commentary was like Paula and Olivia are like in like this amazing resort in Hawaii where like you can do like any, you can go scuba diving or whatever, like
right,
it's just like this amazing resort, and they're talking about how bored they are, and they're like, oh, do you have drugs? Like weed wasn't good enough.
yeah,
Like they start smoking weed and they're like, do you have drugs? And then like they start pulling out like ketamine and all this other stuff, and I was like, this is insane. Like most
yeah.
people, like 99% of the planet would like, just to be in a place like that would be a miracle, but for them it's like,
Yeah, I mean, where was that? I mean,
we got to get
was this
stoned.
another thing that's realistic? Do you get people who are like, okay, like this? These are like Mean Girls, right? This could have been like from a 1990s or 1980s show, but at the same time, they're super woke. I mean, are there a lot of people who are, like, compartmentalizing like that, who have just, like, taken, like, criticisms of white males and, like, incorporated it into, like, just the mean girl, like, pretty and angry and, like, resentful towards everyone? Is that a thing, or does, like, wokeness, like, require you to be a little bit more not like that? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I yeah, like well, so you're saying that like wokeness requires you to not like aspire to conventional beauty standards, something
Well,
like that.
partly, yeah, but not just that. Wokeness also, you can't just go around. I mean, you could like you criticize, obviously with wokeness you criticize people for like their racism and sexism and stuff. But do you? I mean, do you are you that like to indulge that kind of pettiness? Of like the old kind of like Mean Girls thing requires like a self-centeredness and sort of like distance from politics and like social concerns that they don't have, right? They still are. So like it's like the wokeness is very very superficial. I mean, it's always superficial, but like it's often superficial. But for them, it's like it's just like a few words, and then like they're the exact same people. Like the Mean Girls are the exact same people they would have been 10, 20, 30
Yeah,
years.
I think
Wokeness hasn't penetrated at all into the personality, which I think is not necessarily realistic, or maybe it is. I
oh no, I
realize
think
that
it is. I mean, I think like wokeness has changed a lot of people in terms of like, including their appearance, like clothes they
yeah,
wear, how they sort of like groom themselves or whatever, like hairstyles and all that stuff. But there are a lot of people who I think like physically they look like conventional or whatever, but they mouth the platitudes and the beliefs and whatever. They kind of want it both ways, right? Like they want to be considered like an attractive person, but they also want the status of like, sort of believing the right things and whatever. Um, and I think like especially among like that level of wealth, it's okay to do that. Like at that level of wealth, it's not you don't often see people like whatever, like disfiguring themselves or like doing
yeah,
weird things to their bodies or their appearance. Like they look kind of like whatever normal, but they still like say the things that you're supposed to say. um Often not really believing them, which I guess is kind of what Paula's point is about Olivia, that
yeah,
Olivia kind of like sort of says she's supportive of whatever the movement is, but then in the end she is like just a part of this rich white family and will sort of go to bat for them, which is like a weird thing. Like Olivia's character didn't make sense to me because like 5 episodes she's shown as like this sort of like cold status playing psychopath who like you know like Paula makes these comments about like we're friends, but Olivia is tricky and like she can't let me have anything better than her. And you see like Olivia flirting with Kai, the handsome Hawaiian guy that Paula had been sleeping with, I guess to like sort of get
yeah.
what her friend has. And then at the end you see like Olivia like in tears and hugging her family and like just very like out of character for her.
No, yeah, I don't think that that's that strict. I mean, because these people live. I mean, these people like just wokeness and the Mean Girls and everything. I mean, they live in this bubble, and like if there's the least bit of danger, like infringes on that, like they had a robbery in in the hotel room, that can
Yeah,
burst, right? Because it's based. It's like this kind of this hard shell, but this hard shell that hasn't been put under any pressure, especially for a young girl. And then she just cracks as soon as there's some danger of someone coming after her family or something. I think,
interesting.
yeah, I don't think that's that crazy.
I don't know though, because like she was like up until that point, she was very cold toward her family and
Oh
very
no, yeah,
dismissive. And like,
yeah.
she was like okay with her brother sleeping outside and like putting him in the kitchen and like locking him in that little room. And like, she just seemed like very dismissive and like, yeah, just didn't care about what was
No,
going
but
on
she's
with her
not
family.
scared of that. I mean, but that's before she's scared. That's before something happens, right?
Mm,
She's
okay.
in her fantasy world where nothing will ever go wrong and there's no physical danger and nothing's going to happen to anyone.
But did she think that they were in danger though? Because she was aware that Paula had helped orchestrate that robbery. So did she
Not
really think her
right.
family was
But
in
she
any
could. I mean,
danger?
you could still be in danger. I mean, dad got beaten up. I mean, he could still be in danger,
Oh,
right?
I see. Yeah,
And
okay. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Because she doesn't know the circumstances of how that all went down, and
yeah. I
yeah.
thought Kai was going to murder the mother when he came in. I thought he was going to rape her or murder her or something. That would have been
What? Nothing in his character indicated that he was capable of that.
heat of the moment. I don't know.
And,
She threatens to call the police. It could have. Yeah, that would have made him even
one thing
more
that I
crazy.
was like, I'm glad that they played that scene the way they did, because I was very concerned that like as soon as Mark ran into the room when Kai was robbing and like pushed the whatever, grabbed the mother and pushed her on the ground, I was like, this better not be like Mark being able to beat this guy up, because that is not in the realm of possibility that he would be
If he can
capable
tackle, I mean, if
of
he
taking this
tackles
guy
him,
down.
yeah. I mean, if he
Unless he
tackles him
got
and
like a really good first hit, like unless he
yeah.
grabbed something and hit this guy first and gave him like a sort of a well placed attack, but otherwise like there was no way that he was going to be able to take this guy. So I think it went down the way it should have gone down, which is he tackled him. The guy immediately gets up and punches him twice and runs away. Like
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
about what should have happened. So
yeah. I feel
yeah,
bad for the guy. Well, I
kept
feel
it
bad.
kept realistic. You felt
Yeah,
wait, you
whatever.
felt bad for which guy?
Oh no, Kai. I mean, he's gonna go to jail for a long time because he listened to that dumb
Yeah,
girl.
because of Paula, right? That was a weird, like, I don't know if there was supposed to be like an implicit message that the writers of the show were trying to send of like, so Paula was trying to help this guy break into the
Well, that's what Andrew
Mossbachers
Sullivan
safe,
says,
get
right?
some money. What's that?
That's what Andrew Sullivan says. You try to act on wokeness, like these, theories, and you see what happens.
Ah, okay. Yeah, interesting. Is
Right.
that
It's like a reparations thing. It's like go in there
if you
and
try to get the reparations, it's not going to go well or something, or like at the end of
yeah,
the day, it's going to be like you're the one who ends up getting arrested anyway.
yeah,
Like, okay,
yeah.
and that's yeah, it's terrible that it happened to Kai too, because he was like, he was like this innocent guy who's just working at the hotel, and now he's going to jail.
Mm.
Yeah, and Paula doesn't. So I guess this is also sort of a reflective of like the class divisions, which is like this was all Paula's idea. She talked him into it. Remember, he
Yeah,
was like, "It's not the same people." Like, she's like, "These people stole your land," and Kai's like, "It wasn't these people who stole it," and she's like, "It is those people. Go steal those
yeah.
bracelets." And she pays no price for it, right? Like
Yeah, like
Paula,
she's
even
well,
though she's half black.
she's reading some book on decolonization after that. Like
Hmm.
they show them and like I don't know, Olivia's reading one thing. She's reading decol. Like I think that's supposed to be like division. Like Olivia's reading
Oh,
some different author, and she's reading colonization, and they're separate because they're different. And Paula, I mean, it's interesting because she's a person of color, right? And that means something to her, right? She sees like the world as us versus them, whites and non-whites. But we're never even told like what race she is. So she's not like reading about Black history or whatever. She could be part Indian. I don't know. I don't know what she is. She could be, from Latin America or something. And like, but it's like we're supposed to. I don't know if we're supposed to like that's meaningful or like the producer actually does see the world that way, because I do think like nobody ever points that out. It's just taken for granted by everyone in this universe that because she's not white or she has some non-white significant component to her ancestry, like her and Kai are like in the she could be like first generation immigrant to the United States, like second generation immigrant to the United States from some country that was never colonized, and like the fact that she has anything in common with Kai, who's like the native Hawaiians who lost their land, all of that is
yeah,
just taken for granted. It's never seen as any kind of paradox or anything strange about what's happening.
yeah. Well, the other thing is like, so I think when she was with Kai, shortly after they had hooked up, and he was like, I think he asked her to stay or was like sort of like seeing what her plans were, and she was like, I can't stay here, I have to go back to college, I have a whole life. And I think this was also this commentary of like, okay, so they're both like whatever, they're both members of an oppressed class or whatever, but like Paula can still go back. Like she gets to go back to her fancy college and like go back to her normal life, and Kai has to stay there and continue sort of working his blue collar job or whatever. And so like this is also this kind of commentary that like even within these these sort of group categories, there is still like these sharp class divisions, and it's such that like the richer sort of like non-white oppressed person actually like becomes the reason why the other one ends up going to jail. Like
Yeah,
like tricking this poor kid into doing something terrible and ruining his future out of her own like misguided sense of social justice. And she pays like zero price, right? Because even though Olivia knows what her friend did to her own family, she's still not going to rat her out because whatever, they're friends. And like that's just like when you're in that rich elite bubble, like that's just how it is, right? Like no one ends up paying any kind of like severe price for anything that they ever do. You see Shane like shaking the hand of the police detective after he stabs Armand. Spoiler alert for
yeah.
whoever's watching this, but like Shane stabs Armand, and then like the like smash cut to like Shane shaking hands with the cop, like, yeah, I killed this guy. Thanks very much, officer.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, the guy
no
pooped
one
in.
pays
The
a
guy
price
left
for what they
behind some
do.
evidence. The guy pooped in his. I think we know he broke in, and we know he pooped in his. I think they have DNA evidence
That
that can make help you get off, and I think that helps Shane.
Yeah, was that like the first like in profile scene of someone
I
defecating?
hated
Like,
that.
and
Why did
that
we need
was
to see that? Why did we need to see him pooping?
I
I did
know
not.
that was
I
horrible. Yeah,
Yeah, it
but
was
yeah, so
disgusting.
so
We did not need to
Armand
see.
and
They didn't need to show it. I didn't. They were showing his face at start. I didn't think they would take like a profile of the whole thing. I hope it wasn't real. I mean, I just hope. But oh my
oh
god.
no. Yeah, that would be horrible if that was real.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I didn't even consider that.
the other gross thing at the beginning was when he was playing with his balls, Mark, and he was showing his testicles and saying, "Are they getting bigger? Do I have testicle cancer?" And that was unnecessary too. He has a close up of him touching it. Like, why are they doing this stuff? I don't know, like why
Yeah, and
it's
it's
needed.
very it's mostly male kind of, right? Like you see Armand giving a rim job to the young hot
Oh yeah, and
surfer
he's also,
guy.
yeah,
So it's sort
that's
of
another
like
one.
male stuff. Although like
He's
there was like a very brief clip of Rachel, so the actress Alexandra Daddario, you know, you very briefly see her topless or something. But
do
like
you
yeah, most of the most of
do you see
this is
Rachel
like
topless?
yeah, at one point, like she's in bed and Shane like lifts the covers and you see her very briefly. It was like, you know, sort of like blink and you miss it kind of thing.
Must have missed
Um,
it.
but yeah, most
I
of it
saw
was
all the
like
gay
this sort of
stuff. I
male.
wish I would have signed that instead of all the pooping.
Oh man, yeah, those yeah, there were some like kind of shots in this show that were tough to watch. But
Yeah.
yeah, man, what else did you find interesting about this show
So
or
yeah,
other
so one thing we
characters?
didn't cover was the relationship between the father Mark and the son Quinn, and this
Oh
was
yeah,
the only thing I was emotionally invested in was Quinn when he says, "I don't want to go back to school. I just want to like paddle to Micronesia or whatever." I really wanted him to do it, and they didn't let him, and I was like, I hope he just runs away, and then he does run away at the end, and I was happy that
yeah.
he gave up on school and
He
just went
was
to.
the one person who like went through like a character transformation, right? Like who actually had like character growth through the show. Like everyone
Yeah.
else remained the same, and Quinn was the one who like sort
Right.
of like
And
found
the
a different
parents were, I
direction.
mean, the fact that like these people are trying to be liberal, but they're still like so conventional in their thinking. It's like, oh my God, you know, he's like, he's got this life, like going to school every day, and he's like miserable. He hates his life, and like, you know, he's nothing. And he gets like a taste of like being out in the ocean and like doing something physical, and he loves it. And they're like, no, no, you have to
Yeah.
go back. You can't, you know,
So
you're
how
so.
did he end up going back there though? Was because I saw like he was in line like to board the jet, but
He
someone
just
like
ran.
let him. He
No, no,
just
he didn't
bolted.
go in. He never went in the plane. They're in line to get on the plane, and the dad is like, "Come on, Quinn, come here!" Like he wants him to come. He's just behind his dad in the line to get in the plane, and then he just runs off.
And he bolts. Okay, okay, got it. So none of the parents didn't want him to. Interesting, because like I couldn't like I don't know why I didn't notice this about like did the dad let him go or like how did
No,
that
the dad
actually
was
work?
saying, "Oh, I don't
Yeah.
think. No, I think the dad was saying, "Come on, why are you like staying that far back in line?" And then he's like, "Don't worry, you know,
Okay.
I'll come, I'll come."
Because I was
I don't
thinking like in a
know.
sort of strategic way, like when like if and when Quinn ends up applying to college, like that's going to be a hell of a personal statement for his admissions packet, right? Like, you know, the time I ran away when I was 16 to go like rowing with Hawaiians to Micronesia, like
Yeah,
that's going to be a like, you know, the sort of like the most impressive admissions essay, like that's going to go right to the top of the pile. So, you know, like in a way, there is this sort like if the parents were okay with it, that could easily be like a reason why that like how many
maybe.
chances do you get to like have this incredible personal story as a
Yeah,
rich kid, right? Like, you know, it's hard for rich kids to have those sort of like captivating personal interest stories because like if Quinn had just gone back with them, gone to private school, whatever, like you don't have that story. But if you go off to like, you know, row with these like ethnic Hawaiians to like some, you know, whatever, like that's a powerful story that rich kids usually don't have.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know,
I'm a
there is
big.
this sort of like instrumental approach to like even adventures like that among rich people like that. Many of them do think that way. You know, like
Yeah,
how do I
yeah. I
turn
mean,
this experience into something
yeah.
tangible for my personal advancement?
Well, you know, a lot of people are talking about the education system as being sort of not good for males, and I think that's right. Now, I don't think it's good
Okay.
for anyone, but it's
Yeah.
particularly ill suited for men. And like, you know, but people don't have any conception that anything else is possible. Like a 16-year-old to go live you know, on his own. Like his people have done that throughout history. Like you know, people can do that. We say no, you're going to stay in the cocoon until you're, you know, you're in your mid 20s. You're going to go to college. I mean, it's very unhealthy. And the fact that he's going out there like at a young age and doing something, you know, I was very
Yeah.
happy about that.
I was thinking about that. Like, would I let my son, you know, I don't have kids, but if I were to have a son, would I let him go off like that? I'm not sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think I
I think
would. Yeah,
you think you would?
yeah, I
Yeah.
hate that.
Well, I mean, if it's between that or like, you know, going to some private school where they're just like
Or the way,
fed a
given the
bunch
way he
of
was, given the
wokeness.
way his life was, I mean, and like how he's just miserable and, you know, directionless, and he went out there to
Did he
breathe the
have?
fresh air.
Did this kid have autism or Asperger's or something? Because Olivia kept making these like snide comments early on in the show about like, oh, he's stimming. Like stimming is like what autistic people do to like stimulate
Skimming,
themselves.
is that what they call it? What is it?
Stimming is like moving their hands. Like autistic people move their hands or whatever. And I guess this is like a way for them to like, I don't know. It's like entertaining or interesting for them to do this. They call it stimming, as in like stimulation. Um,
I don't know.
and I wondered
He's
like, and they put him in that closet or like the kitchen or whatever, and like I can't imagine like an ordinary 15-year-old boy being cool with that. But like if he's if he has some kind of like condition, then maybe he wouldn't care as much. Like
I mean, I
I
think
couldn't
he's
tell.
yeah. I mean,
Did
I
he
don't
have
know.
anything?
I think we define pretty much we define a lot of males these days as autistic or Asperger. So like I think he's like, he's a man who like a young man who is yeah, has these traits that are typically male, and I don't like how we always pathologize it and make it into like, like we don't call what the girls are doing like behaving in their feminine way, some kind of disease.
Oh,
We just don't call.
well, I mean, I clearly think that Olivia is a psychopath, but
Yeah, but we don't
fair
have a
enough.
female specific. We don't have a female specific disease. Even that's a male, a
Yeah.
majority male disease.
Okay.
So yeah, this is
Well,
kind
the
of
ones
this
that used to be sort of female, whatever, like stereotypically female, like
like
hysteria,
hysteria.
right?
Yeah,
Like those have
exactly.
become sort
Yeah,
of
they're not
taboo.
diseases anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sort of flipped, and now we have very male diseases. That's a good point.
Yeah, so I like that. I mean, the dad. I don't know. Like the dad is just. It's funny, but there's one scene where he's like, it's tough for us these days. He's like, because we, quit is like, because we can't harass women. And then he's like, oh,
He said no.
yeah.
Well,
He's like,
yeah.
sort of like, yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, the general commentary is, yeah, we have to talk about, yeah, we have to talk about Mad Men soon. I'm on a few episodes. I've got a few more episodes, like two more
What is
episodes.
this? Oh,
Mad Men.
Mad Men. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. We
I'm
can get
finishing
into
it up
Mad
because
Men too later on.
there's something, yeah, because this reminds me of like the whole like idea, like it's so pessimistic, like the modernity is so, it's such a pessimistic view of it, right? It's like these people are either working in these terrible jobs, or if they get like these hospitality jobs and there's like a lot of indignities there, or they're like rich and then they like don't know what to do with their money or to do with their time, and the only happiness is like paddling in the Pacific Ocean. That's like the only like thing that seems like to make anyone happy, right? It's like it's like a primitive, like if everyone just got back to like nature and like did more things like that, like people would be happier. I think that's the message and the understanding, right? 'Cause what else is there to be happy besides paddling in the Pacific? Like who else like has a arc
Yeah,
or
there
at
are a
least a
lot of
way to
those
get to
kind of
happiness?
like that is like sort of a trope in like even Mad Men, right? Whenever Don goes to California, you see him become like a new man and like feel like experience more fulfillment or something
Yeah,
than when he's
I
in
don't think this.
Manhattan
Yeah, I
working
don't
his
think
job.
this view is that. Well, I mean, we'll talk about Mad Men later, but I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that I think that office life in that is pretty cool. I mean, I think especially in the early seasons, I think that is supposed to be cool.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
but
yeah, but I think this
this is
idea of
nothing.
like
This has nothing like that. This has nothing.
affluent people trying to like return to nature in some
I
way.
think the other character is that's a little bit sympathetic. Maybe has it figured out. It's what's the wife's name again? The Mark's wife is the Hillary Clinton type
Nicole
character.
Mossbacher.
Nicole, yes. I think she is like supposed to be like a well-adjusted, responsible, like liberal, but not like too liberal or crazy, practical,
Yeah, she
focusing
was
on supporting the
early on.
family.
They tried to like portray her as like manic, right? Because she was constantly moving furniture around in the hotel room, and Olivia kept saying,
Yeah.
"Mom, like there's medication for this. Stop stressing out, whatever." And I couldn't quite tell if like was she manic? Did she have something going on with her? But in the end, she did turn out to be like I
Well,
think pretty well adjusted, pretty well
she's on
mannered.
the line with China. Somebody makes some comment about China. Was it Olivia or something? Do you remember this? Who was that? Something about selling out to China or something. Do you remember this?
Yeah. Well, I remember she had a work conference or something in the hotel room with her like Chinese clients or something.
Yeah, and somebody said something about China, but I don't remember. I don't remember now. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think she's
But
like
she was a good mom though, I thought. Like she
yeah,
wasn't
she's like yeah,
like
she's
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think she's supposed to be the most like there's sympathetic, like there's sympathetic characters who are miserable, like Rachel, right? Sympathetic and miserable. So like who is like sympathetic and happy? Quinn at the end, he's sympathetic the whole time, but then he's only happy when he goes hangs out with the Hawaiians. And
Yeah.
the mother is closest to sympathetic and happy
Although even
of
a
the
she, so
character.
now I'm thinking about her interactions with Rachel. There was that like So
Oh yeah,
early
when
on,
she
like
went crazy.
remember
Yeah, yeah,
Rachel sees her and says like how much she admires her, and like Nicole at first, the mom, is sort of like, like trying to support this young woman's career. I think she even asks Nicole for advice about what to do, and I think Nicole's like, you should whatever, go for what you want, or I don't know, gives her some kind of validation. And then Nicole discovers that Rachel wrote that piece that Nicole believed was like a hit piece on her, saying, "Oh, she rode this Me Too wave to her current position in her career." And suddenly the claws come out, and she becomes like very unpleasant, but in like a very sort of like subtle way, right? Like, yeah, like I mean, like within the
yeah,
context of the show. So yeah, she sort of like says like that
yeah.
was a fuck. She straight up said like that was a fucked up piece. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that was yeah a hint of like yeah. Not. I mean, I think compared to the universe of characters and how sympathetic they are. Right.
yeah.
I don't think that was nearly anywhere
I don't
close to
know. I
like
don't
the
think it
worst.
was, but I did find it interesting that like, she
And she
turned on a
always has these good
dime.
yeah, and she always has these good rebuttals to like Olivia and Paula. Right. And it was
Yeah.
like her like of Hillary Clinton. Like yeah, I think like yeah, I think the producers just like Hillary Clinton. I think they just
I
that's what they want. They don't
think
want
the
to go
producers are
any
sort of
further than
like
that. Yeah. They
centrist liberals.
yeah, I mean that is yeah. I mean I think there's a reason Andrews. I think it is like Andrew Sullivan. I keep talking about Andrew Sullivan.
Yeah.
He's the only review I read. I should have read more reviews. I had more to comment on. But yeah, it does seem to me like it's Andrew Sullivan's politics pretty much, or maybe a little bit more
Interesting.
liberal, but something he's clearly comfortable with.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the show was like when I hadn't finished the show when I read Andrew Sullivan's comments, and yeah, I think I still think it was like a little too optimistic, but I do see that it like the show was like taken as a whole, like yeah, kind of a critique of wokeness, and while at the same time like sort of showing us, sort of the effects of these beliefs, and how I think it is like somewhat sympathetic to them. Like we sort of understand like why Kai would be upset, and why he would attempt to go for that robbery. Like why he would allow himself to be talked into attempting to rob the
Yeah,
family by Paula. But like, you sort of, I think you feel bad for the guy, but you're not outraged, right? Because it's still wrong what he did.
yeah.
And I still like, yeah, I feel bad for the kid, but at the same time, like what he did was horrible. Like, and sort of the way that he scared Nicole and punched Mark, like that whole situation was like, whatever. Maybe he shouldn't have been arrested and hauled to jail, but he definitely should have been fired.
Well, you should be arrested. I mean, you're a pretty liberal guy if you think you can steal $70,000, something.
I don't
And
know.
a piece of jewelry, and you get 70,000 and not getting arrested. I think is pretty lenient. Pretty so.
Okay,
Not even
okay,
San
fine.
Francisco, will
Even for
arrest you
San
for that.
Francisco, that's a felony. It's not a misdemeanor. San Francisco, $75,000 bracelet. Yeah, that's not a
Yeah, no
misdemeanor.
matter what race you are, you steal 75,000. I think San
Yeah, well,
Francisco will
Hawaiian. I
arrest
mean, but well, if you're a Hawaiian who's had your land stolen, yeah, because like, yeah, where do Hawaiians fall under the sort of the oppression pyramid or whatever,
you.
But I guess
Yeah,
if you've had
they
your
need
land
to be in
stolen and
that
you're an
context to
indigenous
be very.
person, you come in second place, right? Because there's BIPOC, it's black, and then indigenous, so he's in second, like he's sort of in that
Yeah.
category of like
But the Hawaiians, yeah, I mean, the
esteemed.
Hawaiians are not, I mean, they're like sometimes you'll see indigenous and they'll be like, super miserable and like drunk on their reservations. They're all like healthy and like happy and like, you don't get the sense that they're, constantly suffering as a result of their oppression. So there's that too. It's like, yeah, they got something stolen, but they still get to live in Hawaii and they're still in shape. I guess that makes it less depressing. But of course, that's the hotel because it's
And they're more
they're not gonna have.
distant from, I think, yeah, they're kind of like, geographically disconnected from sort of the like politics of oppression.
Yeah, it's a very localized thing. Something
And they have
people
their own
very local.
culture, right? Like they've sort of like, I think because they've been geographically isolated, they have their own culture, and they don't have to like adopt the beliefs and neologisms of like upper middle class white sort of like grievance politics or something, because they have a tradition that extends hundreds or thousands of years or whatever. Like that's sort of what happens to like immigrants in the US, right? Like the newly arrived immigrants to the US sort of like have their old traditions, they don't get sucked into it, like the oppression stuff, and then they have kids who do, right? So it's sort of like the first and second generation immigrants, like Asian, kids of Asian immigrants or Hispanic immigrants who suddenly like, you know, become like hyper woke.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's right. Yeah. Anything? I mean, anything else in the show? I think we covered. I think we covered quite a bit.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah,
I
I mean,
think
would you recommend the viewers to watch it?
if you have a soft, I mean, if you have a heart, your stomach. I mean, when he looks like he's about to start to poop, turn away because you're gonna
Turn
see
away.
it.
Yeah, close your eyes
You're
for
gonna
about 10
you're
seconds.
gonna see it. You won't miss anything in the story. It wasn't necessary to see it
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. I think it
Uh,
was like, yeah, it's not like a must watch, but it's entertaining and
it's not a must watch, but I think
but
the fact that
it's
it
fun.
gave us so much to talk about during this conversation. First of all, I don't know like why a person would be. I would never listen to an entire podcast with all the spoilers, and then watch something. If you want to watch it, you should probably should have watched it
That's fair enough.
before
Yeah.
listening to us. But yeah, but if I was gonna, yeah, it's worth it. I guess depends on what
I
else
wonder
you're
how many
doing. It's
people
not a
watch
must watch.
shows after they listen to us talk about it versus before. Maybe I'll run a Twitter poll. Like, do we,
Yeah,
how do you listen to these? Do you listen to them before or after you, or do you watch it in the middle, right? Because like sometimes I'll listen to whatever. I'll read something in the middle of a series, right? Like I read Andrew Sullivan's piece even though I hadn't finished the series yet. So I'm curious
how
how
can
people.
you? I mean, how do you do that? Because I want to be like, I don't want spoilers. I mean, that's part of the sort of the joy of
I think for
watching.
a
So
show like
I'm paranoid
this,
about it.
yeah, for a show like this, where like I don't think they're like maybe the biggest spoilers, like who's in the casket, but like even that to me wasn't like a big. This wasn't like a thriller or suspense or anything. So for something like
Mm,
this, I didn't really care about spoilers.
yeah, I like to go in fresh. I like to know as little as possible usually before I go into something. But okay, yeah, maybe we'll ask our listeners and our readers. Okay, that was fun, Rob. Thanks a lot. I mean, I think yeah, I guess overall, yeah, depending on what else you're doing. I mean, the fact I wasn't that crazy about it. Like when we started talking, but the fact that it gave us so much to talk about, I think changed my mind a little bit. In retrospect, makes me a little bit friendlier to it, and maybe look at it with sort of a new eyes. So yeah, I guess it is worth watching.
Yeah, I think if you
Um,
watch it in the right way, I mean, if you keep an eye out for all of these sort of subtleties within the show, which I think were more or less, I think they were well done. So yeah,
yeah.
this was
Okay.
fun.
Cool.
Thanks, Richard.
Until next time. Bye.
I'll see you later.